All right, so we'll go ahead and go into the process of launching into new marketplaces. Don't worry too much about feeling like you're going to have all this down, because I'm going to throw this out here pretty quick just for the sake of time. If you go to CanadaChecklist.com, I've got a checklist to walk you through the Canadian portion of this. So the first thing you're going to do is decide where to begin, which marketplace to go to, and I'll give you my opinion on that. Validate that your listing could potentially sell in that other marketplace. Register with that applicable government for whatever it is you're supposed to register for. Add your listings, send in your inventory, maximize the currency, and I'll give you a couple tips there. And then you're going to manage your international business and grow it. So, where should you begin? I kind of already alluded to this. My suggestion is to start with Canada. The reason I suggest starting with Canada is it's English speaking. So the nice thing is you don't have to learn a new language. Now, if you speak German or if you speak Spanish or French or whatever the case is, you're at an advantage for going into some of those other marketplaces as well. But for those of us who maybe don't know all these other languages, English speaking is where I usually suggest you start. The culture is very similar to the US. I was trying to find the exact number, but it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of the Canadian population lives within 100 miles of the US border. So just put that in perspective. I find the logistics, especially starting out, are much simpler. So depending on where you store stuff, you could just take a little bit. You could even do a removal order from Amazon if you wanted to just take a small batch of your products to ship it up there and just start testing the waters. The sales tax process is similar, but actually easier, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. It's very much more similar to the US than Europe is. And then they also have sponsored ads. You might be saying, well, great, they have sponsored ads. Australia, as of when Amazon's Australian team contacted me, you start getting contacted from Amazon once you go into one marketplace. But their team told me they did not yet have sponsored ads in Australia at the time that they contacted me, which was like in March. But then after you get up in Canada and you've had a chance to kind of get your feet wet and your confidence going into another country, at that point you can now expand into Europe. If you think you want to try Japan, go for it. If Australia is worth it to you, you can try Australia. And Australia, from my understanding, is also going to be adding in New Zealand. So that's another base of 5 million people. Probably not going to be a huge amount of sales, but again, as we widen that net, we catch more fish, and by fish we make sales. So just a little example of the difference between the two marketplaces. In the US, there's roughly 328 million, we'll just call it 330 million people. In Canada, there's about 37 million people, so roughly 10%. If you talk to sellers that are in Canada, not always, but generally about 10% of their sales that they see in the US, they see in Canada. As you saw in my screenshot earlier, I was getting about 13% last year. I'm on about that pace again this year. They have, we have the dollar here in the US, they have the dollar in Canada. It's the Canadian dollar. It's not the same. So just because they call it the dollar, it's not exactly the same. Oh, whoops. And then you have potential sales tax requirements, whereas in the US, whereas you could have GST requirements in Canada. And that's their goods and services tax. They also have the harmonized sales tax. My accountant kind of refers to it as alphabet soup because they have all these taxes. We'll just call it sales tax. Just to keep it very simple, starting off, you only really need to register with the federal government. And then if you had to go into every province, there's only 4 provinces with their own sales tax. I'm not even registered in any of the provinces just yet. My accountant said maybe in the next year or so I might look into British Columbia. But to keep it simple, you really could just go into the federal sales tax system in Canada. We use the customary system. They have the metric system, but if you had inches and ounces on your listing, they would understand what you meant. So we want to now evaluate, will our product sell? So anybody use a tool like Jungle Scout, or I know there's a lot of similar ones? Yeah, so you guys are pretty familiar with getting a sense of, they're not perfect as to exactly what something's going to sell, but we can at least see, do similar products to ours sell? Don't worry too much about the exact numbers, like try to see like, okay, my competitor here is doing 400 sales in the US, but they're getting X number of sales in Canada. Don't get too caught up in it. It's just more, is there potential? Because chances are, if it's going to sell in one country, it's going to sell in the other. And one of the things to keep in mind that could be a little discouraging when you look at it is you might think, oh, well, the sales aren't that high. Well, they're not going to be as high as they are in the US. But if you start thinking of like, okay, if I have 5 SKUs and it's telling me I might get 1, 2 a day in Canada, well, that's only 1 or 2 a day. But if you have 5 SKUs, you could be looking at 5, 8, maybe 10 sales a day. Think of all the things you might be doing now to generate another 5, 8, 10 sales a day, trying to find all these keywords or trying to maximize PPC or do giveaways or all these things, when you could just slap it up there and potentially get another 5 to 10 sales a day in another marketplace. So this is the mindset I recommend having when you're looking in these other marketplaces. Just keep this in mind. If your product sells in the US and similar products sell in that marketplace, in our example, Canada, it's worth at least trying. You can always start with a small batch. If you run out of inventory, it's fine. You want to at least start small and you can always build up from there. So now we're going to talk about what you need to do to register with the Canadian government. So there's a form you have to fill out. It's called Form RC1. And again, I've got this. If you go to CanadaChecklist.com, you can download a checklist, and it's kind of a mini guide where I walk through a lot of this. But basically, what you're going to do is, it's this long form. You don't have to fill out the whole thing. In fact, if you fill out the whole thing, they're going to put you in a bunch of programs you don't want to be in. So I'm going to tell you the exact ones you want to get into. So you want to get a business number. That's kind of like the standard thing, that you want to get a business number. So business number is kind of like your EIN here in the US, your federal tax number. Then you're going to register for GST and HST. Then what you're going to do is you're also going to get import-export as a non-resident. You might hear people talk about NRI or non-resident importer, and that's what they're talking about here. The process generally takes about a month before they issue you your number. Once they issue you your number, you can then go and create a shipment, and it will get across the border. And then you have to work with a customs broker, but we'll get into that here in a moment. So then you want to add your listings. There's all kinds of different ways you could add your listings. Amazon's piloting some programs where you could potentially have your US inventory sold in Canada. I'm telling you from my own personal experience and from the personal experience of people I've talked with and just what I've seen others discuss online and the clients I've worked with, the best thing to do is add unique offers into the other marketplaces and send in inventory. It's a little bit more of a hoop to jump through, but the more you're willing to jump through hoops, the better it's going to be. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, I'm doing business with Canada, a little business, but
sure.
I haven't signed up. I never signed up with the government. I've been exporting for a couple of years to the country. Okay, the export, it used to get stopped at the border, and they'd have to call me, and it'd take a little while to get it moved into Canada. But now, I just send it in. They just it just gets to the warehouse pretty quickly. I don't know, but I didn't know. I'm not sure what.
We can talk more about that offline. But my guess is whoever is your freight forwarder is, they're probably putting in maybe their business number, which means they're also getting what's called an input credit for the taxes you're going to be paying at the border, whereas you want that input credit. Oh. But we can go into your specific situation offline.
And also, I don't have a government license. And nobody's asked me about it in Amazon or anything else.
Well, it's kind of like a lot of things. Amazon's not going to force you to put in your tax ID numbers. So like same thing here in the US. But I tend to like to go with somewhat by the book, at least on one side of the gray area, But that's a great question. We can go more in depth on that afterwards. So I want to talk to you guys real quick about something called gray listings. If you have products, just for fun, after this, look up your brand name. I bet you'll find your products. Anybody have a calculator handy? Anybody want to take 7475 and divide it by 1.33? That'll tell us about what the U.S. equivalent of this particular thing. What is that?
5620.
5620. So that means someone is selling this sippy cup thingy. We have one similar to this in my house. But basically, someone's selling it for $56. There's people who, this is kind of on the other side of gray hat, they have bots that just scrape listings on Amazon in the US and they put them up in Canada. If you see yours, don't worry about it. You are going to get the buy box. Because Amazon knows the price is, they don't really care exactly, but they know whoever is going to have the best price is going to win the buy box. So this is the same product in the US. It's selling for $13. People are willing to pay a little bit more even when you adjust for the currency in Canada. Part of it is because if you think of Canada, people live in these big pockets like Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver, and those are expensive cities like San Francisco and New York. And if they don't live there, they live like in the middle of nowhere. Anyone ever been to Sanderson, Florida? It's my last name. You've been to Sanderson, Florida? I'm excited that you've actually been there. I have been wanting to go to Sanderson, Florida for the longest time. I finally went there back in January. We took a family picture below the sign that said Sanderson, and we then drove into the town, and I've never been so disappointed in my life. There was nothing there. My understanding is that's kind of like the towns in the outskirts of the outskirts of Canada. That at best they might be like Okeechobee, if you've ever been to Okeechobee. If you've not, don't worry about it. But a little bit more because these big cities are expensive, or they live out in the middle of nowhere and there's like a small general store that might be the size of this room, and that's where they can get stuff. So their other option is to go on their phone and Amazon just delivers stuff to their door. So what do you think they do? They're willing to pay a little bit of a premium, but not quite that level of premium. So you will get the buy box very quickly, is my point, if there's gray listings of your product. So one thing just to keep in mind, this seems to trip people up, but how do I work stuff on Canada? So you probably see at the top of Seller Central, you can probably imagine there's like a search feature, the settings and all that. There's this little drop down. You might even see in your account now where you could switch to Canada. All you do is you switch to Canada, and then all of a sudden now it says Canada. And so whatever you're doing, you're creating listings or whatever the case is in Canada. So now we're going to add our listings into Canada. So you can either add them individually or you can add them as a bulk upload. If you're comfortable with bulk uploads, do it. If you have a lot of products and you want to learn it, maybe. Otherwise, individual is actually pretty simple. So if you're doing them individually, and it's probably similar to what you've done before here in the US, where basically you're just putting in some basic information. One thing to keep in mind, the UPC code and the ASIN will be the same as what your product is in the US. So it will actually match up if you put some basic information in, the product identifier, which could be the UPC or the ASIN. It's actually, I found it works either way. Your brand name, your title of the product, the manufacturer, which is probably you as well, or if you're doing wholesale, it could be whoever it is. The price you're going to sell at, and when you're doing the price, just keep this in mind. You're not putting your price of what you're selling it in the US. It's whatever you want to sell it in that currency. So in our Canada example, you'd probably want to take like 1.3, maybe even 1.4. And sometimes you can even get away with adding another $1 or $2 on it. Because like I said, people are willing to pay a little bit more in Canada. Then you want to make sure to check off that you want Amazon to dispatch and provide customer service for the items you sell. And then if you have a way that you like doing your SKUs, you could put in the same SKU -CA or whatever you want. But you're generally going to want to have its own SKU. if you're doing bulk uploads, if you're not familiar, there's a report you can actually get. You have to ask for it and only give it to you for 7 days. They'll give you access to it. It's called the Category Listings Report. It's where you can actually get all the data on your products. In fact, if you're just curious, you might just put in a help desk ticket to Seller Central and ask for the Category Listings Report. And it's going to give you everything on your product, where you got like the title, you've got the browse nodes, which is like the categories that it's in. You've got all this information on your product, so then you could take that, and that's what you can create your bulk upload off of. But I would suggest you might just want to have it handy just for the sake of having it handy. So now that we've created our listings, we're going to send in inventory. And just a note on that, Amazon doesn't want to get involved in shipping across the borders. So you're on your own. Now, I suggest using a freight forwarder, or you can also use UPS. I used UPS for the longest time. Now they've given me good discounts, but I have a freight forwarder I like working with. They're called First Choice Shipping. I'll show you them on another page here. But I've found, now granted, I can't speak for all freight forwarders and their ways they're doing it, but I've found at least the way UPS and my freight forwarders do it, which I believe is the right way, is that you're going to pay GST at the border. So here's one thing about GST. Canada's kind of got a value-added tax system. It's a little different than our sales tax here. So when you go across the border, whatever your declared value is, which is the value of what you paid for the product, not what you're going to sell it for, just keep that in mind so you're not paying too much than you have to. You're going to declare your value based on what you paid for that product, and they're going to charge you GST on that at the border. Well, when you're collecting GST from customers, that sales tax I was telling you, you're going to subtract out whatever you paid into the system, which includes what you paid at the border. So keep your invoices, because you can have that as a credit. So where do you find shipping? UPS, FedEx, they do this all the time. UPS Standard is what I use. It's basically the ground shipping for international. If you want, Amazon has a service provider list. If you're not familiar with this, I found it and I was like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. Where if you just go in Seller Central, you know that search feature, and just put in service providers, you can find their service provider list. You can look up by marketplace, by like service that you need. If you need prep companies in a certain country or whatever, they'll show you a list. And at least you can see reviews on them, and you kind of know they've been somewhat vetted by Amazon because they're on the list. I use First Choice Shipping. That's again who I use. If you want to get connected with them, I'd be more than happy to make an introduction. One just word of caution I recommend is be very careful with your labels. Doing it the way I'm saying to do it, which I've found seems to maximize the sales you get in the other countries. If you're using FN SKUs, you're going to have a different FN SKU in another country. Sometimes they can fix it if you send the wrong FN SKU to the wrong country, but the FN SKU is marketplace specific. So you want to make sure you've got the right labels for the right country. If you're using ASIN labels, or if you just have a UPC code, you're probably going to be fine with just the UPC code. And if you're not 100% sure, you can always call Amazon and they'll help you with that. They can answer the question for you. So then you have to figure out, well, how much do I want to send? So you can start small and test it out. A lot of times I've found people seem to have this mentality of, well, if I'm ordering 1,000 units of my product, and do I need to send another 1,000 units into Canada? No, you can start small. You don't even have to start with a certain percentage. I think you had a question back there?
Yeah, you submit 3 commercial copies of the invoice to send via UPS. That's the invoice that you're referring to, that you got to put whatever you paid for the product.
Yes, that's where you declare. So yes, and your freight forwarder or UPS, when you create the shipment, they actually have, like, it walks you through step by step how to create a commercial invoice.
And you're definitely sure you're supposed to approve what you paid for the product, because on occasion I called and they say you're supposed to approve what you're selling the product for.
Who's they?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Yes. How many times have you gotten an answer from Amazon that was probably not 100% factual?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to clarify.
No, that's a great question. The COO of First Choice Shipping has told me, confirmed what I'm saying, and as well as my tax person. So I feel confident, even though I'm not providing tax advice here, I feel confident in what I'm telling you is pretty accurate to
I
the
always
best of
put
my...
cost of the goods of what I paid for the goods.
Right.
What you're selling it for anyway, so until it's sold.
Right, you're gonna collect on what you sell.
Right, exactly.
anyway.
The value hasn't changed until someone's been willing to buy it. Yes?
If you manufacture yourself, you sell it to yourself, can you offer yourself a discount on the wholesale price on the invoice?
This is Mr. Blackjack, everybody.
Yes. I would call the Canadian Revenue Agency and ask them that question. So whatever you send in, you can base future purchases and how much to decide to send in based on your test data. Then what you can do is I recommend just kind of have in the back of your mind, if you're going to do 10 to 15% of your sales in the US in a particular marketplace, you really only need 10-15% of the inventory. So you don't have to have huge amounts, so it's not this huge capital outlay. And you, again, don't even have to start with that percentage. It could be a smaller percent because you just want to at least get the algorithm going. You're going into a new marketplace, it's a new algorithm, it's a new kind of getting things up and running. And then from there, you could, if you wanted to, you can send things like I do. I'm kind of a control freak, where I send everything to the US and then I send it up to Canada. Europe, I have a prep company that I'm comfortable with that does everything, but in Canada, I send everything myself, but if you got comfortable with it, you can work out with your freight forwarder or your factory that if you're ordering 1,000 units, maybe you want 900 units to go to the US and 100 units to go to Canada, or whatever makes sense for what you're figuring out. Yes, sir?
So for FNSQ, I have private label and FNSQ is on the product label.
Uh-huh.
So do we need to have a different FNSQ for Canada?
Yes, Amazon's, you can pick the SKU, but you can't pick the FN SKU.
Okay.
Amazon assigns the FN SKU for you. So when you create a new offer as a new listing in a new marketplace, they're going to give you a new
But if I'm
FN
shipping
SKU.
that product from Amazon US, like
What's that?
if I create a removal order from Amazon US inventory and send part of it to Canada.
Great question there. I'm glad you asked that question. So the question is about if you did a removal order, which I would do a multi-channel fulfillment order as opposed to a removal order, because they may not, if you do a removal order, sometimes they don't let you send inventory back in for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But let's just say you did a multi-channel fulfillment order.
Okay.
They're not going to ship it straight to Canada. It's going to have to be within the U.S.
Yeah.
So whether it's they send it to you or they send it to a freight forwarder, someone's going to have to receive it, and then whoever that is can put the new label on.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we do have to put that label.
You will have to put on the new label.
Okay.
Yes.
So does Canada collect the sales tax on all their sales?
It's a setting in Seller Central. You just put in your GST number, just like how you put your Florida Department of Revenue number in. You do the same
So
thing.
if you don't put one,
If you don't put one, they don't collect it. So it's to your advantage to put it in there, because that way you're collecting, and then now you have money to subtract from for what you're paying at the border.
Also, if you
Good
start with
question.
Canada, we need your GST, that's it.
What's that?
If you want to start with Canada, we need GST number.
Yeah, the GST, HST number. There's Quebec has the QST, and then there's a PST, provincial sales tax, and 3 other provinces. Don't worry about those, and that's again, even my accountant just told me that.
How much has that costed you to do all that in Canada when you have to, the taxes and stuff? How much is that?
Really nothing, because I'm collecting it. And so the cost of compliance, I've got my Sales Tax and More is the company I use. They're very inexpensive. They could probably do your entire 1 year's return for maybe like a couple $100 at the most.
Will you connect to
Europe too, or?
Well, no. This is for Canada.
Just Canada.
I use a VASC for Europe.
If you use tax jar, will you connect to Canada?
I believe it is connected to Canada, but it's not the same. They don't do filings for you. Yeah.
What do you find the cost differences between shipping to Amazon here in the US versus shipping to Canada?
Great question. What is the cost difference? So Amazon has these bulk contracts with UPS. Have you ever tried shipping anything with UPS and you got disappointed because you're so used to, oh, it only costs like $20 to send all these boxes to Charlotte or wherever, and then you send something like across the street and it's like more than that for one small box, it's because Amazon has these really good rates. You lose some of that, so that's why sometimes it's good to go with a freight forwarder, because your freight forwarder now has this bulk discount, not quite as good as Amazon's bulk discount, but your freight forwarder can get you some benefit. And then over time, in fact, if you want, if somebody wants to contact me, I can get you in contact with my rep at UPS. I'll give it to you in a second. My rep at UPS to get you potentially better rates than what you might be getting now for UPS.
Is there like a rule of thumb though, like a percentage, like it's 10% more, 20% more, so you can kind of.
It all really depends, because even with the Amazon ones, it depends on how far it's going. So, because California is going to be more expensive per pound than if it's going to Ruskin, Florida, or Charlotte.
Is there another monthly fee for Canada, the same as we have?
Great question. Great question. So, up until the other day, everything in North America was all one fee, which makes it nice going into Canada because you're not paying another fee while you're getting up and running. But then Europe was a fee, Japan was a fee. It probably is in your Seller Central because I just saw it like 2 days ago, I think.
All you have to do
Yeah,
is
they
apply
sent an
right
email
now.
where it's like now everything is all one fee. They really want us to go into other marketplaces. So they're incentivizing that by not charging us another
Like
fee.
2 days ago.
Another reason to do it. So great question.
Do you have to do anything for that to happen, or it's just happening automatically?
I've not tried it myself. They make it look like all you have to do is connect your accounts, which all my accounts are connected. So I'll just call them out on it if they charge me in Europe again.
It sounded like they said
Yeah.
A
new
fee for
sellers.
what?
The emails also look like it's
Like your professional selling fee.
they're going to charge you the first month. They're going to charge you, and then they're going to prorate it back or something to the $39 across
Yeah.
the board.
I glanced at it and I looked quickly, so I didn't see the logistics of it, but I'm very curious myself, so it makes it more attractive now to go into Europe because it takes away a little bit of the risk. However, you're gonna sell more than 40 units, so to me it's worth it.
PPC campaigns, do they transfer over, or is that kind of like a brand new entry?
It's a brand new entry, but typically what works in the US is gonna work in Canada and UK because it's English speaking. It's the other countries where it gets a little more,
What about storage fees?
yes, they will charge you storage fees there as
Same
well.
as here.
Well, it's in Canadian dollars, but actually, let's do this. We'll have Q&A here at the end. I think some of the questions that people are asking, I'm going to get to here in a couple slides. So I just want to make sure I get to this. If I don't get to your question, we'll
How to
go
get
for it
paid?
after.
To Amazon, or do we have a bank account over there?
We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Great question. All right, so we're going to create our shipment, and it's a similar process to how you do it in the US. So you just change the drop down to Canada, create a shipment. Amazon will give you labels. So you know, like when you create a shipment, if they're doing the UPS labels, you get a UPS label, and you also get like a label for the box. You'll only get the label for the box. The nice thing is right now, they're not even asking you what's in each box like they do in the US. They just want to know what's in the shipment. So if you got 6 boxes in your shipment, you get 6 labels. You put them in those on those boxes, so they at least know it's part of yours. And then you're going to have to go to your freight forwarder or whatever shipping company you're working with to get your shipping labels. Be very careful about that making sure you got those labels. Because if you just put them outside and have UPS pick it up and they don't have labels, they're not going anywhere. Somebody actually did that, so that's why I say that, just to be on the safe side. Somebody asked about commercial invoice. That is going to be something your supplier or your freight forwarder is going to give you. You're going to have to figure it out with them what the declared value is. If you're using ups.com, it walks you through step by step how to do that. You pick a tariff code. It's actually very simple. They make this follow the bouncing ball, so to speak. So it is pretty simple here. And then what you do is basically you print out 3 copies of your commercial invoice. I literally just put it in a Ziploc bag and I tape it to the side of my box, and you'll have to put it on one box. So one of the boxes in the shipment has to have a commercial invoice. Oh, and if you screw it up and you don't put the invoices in there, UPS will call you and say, please send us a copy of the invoice. So if you get it wrong, it needs it to get across the border. If anything's missing, they're going to contact you. So my biggest suggestion is, as long as you're acting in as good of faith as possible and trying to do the right thing, don't worry too much. It's better to get it out the door. And if you did something that needs a little help, someone along the line will help you because that is their job at UPS or whatever freight forwarding company you're working with. Then you're going to run PPC just like you would in the US.